An important factor for me is recovery, because a couple of those events have been back to back. I can exercise as much as I want, but I need to be able to recover as well. Balance of nature is the most natural form of fuel that I can get on a race. It's helping me to be able to push my body to the limits.
Experience the Balance of Nature difference for yourself. Right now, Balance of Nature is offering free shipping and 35% off on any new preferred order. Call 800-2468-751. That's 800-2468-751. Or by going to balanceofnature.com and make sure to receive this special radio offer by using discount code CHICAGO.
Lowe's is working harder than ever to help pros get the job done with a dedicated team of associates who only serve pros. They stock the top-rated brands you need, offer curbside loading, and can even deliver right to the job site. Service like that is why Lowe's is the new home for pros.
7:06. Worried about basement flooding? Time to call Permaseal. 800-421-SCAL. In our Team Hochberg Traffic Center for us this morning, Jim Talamonte.
Inbound Ryan, traffic is getting heavier this morning. We see delays between 31st Street and the Burns Circle. It's 18 minutes, 95th to downtown. Express lane delays start around 35th. Outbound, it's a 14-minute trip downtown to 95th. Eden's 15 minutes, Lake Cook to Montrose. Kennedy, 20, O'Hare to downtown, outbound the same. Inbound Eisenhower. Traffic's tight, 17th Avenue to Des Plaines Avenue. 29 minutes, 390 to downtown. Outbound, it's 29. A little heavy. Ridgeland to First Avenue. Inbound Stevenson has just a bit of congestion approaching the Ryan. The northbound Tri-State, a little congested around 290. And Aurora Boulder Road has reopened between Tall Oaks and Farnsworth after an earlier crash. And that's traffic. I'm Jim Talamonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. In our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center, our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Today, partly sunny, showers and thunderstorms into the evening hours. They could be severe. High today, 88. Low tonight at 71. Morning shower, thunderstorm tomorrow with a high 87. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
72 at O'Hare. Next news coming up at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. President Trump in Green Bay for a town hall where he was interviewed by Sean Hannity for taking questions from the audience. One of the questions Hannity asked was about him picking all of the fights or taking up all the fights that are picked, particularly with respect to the media. And Trump responded.
For those that say, well, maybe you shouldn't fight on all these issues, what do you say to that?
I don't think I have a choice. If I didn't take on the media, I guarantee I wouldn't be here with you tonight. I'd be watching on television. Maybe I'd be in the crowd, but I'd be watching. I wouldn't be interviewed. You couldn't win. And I have it even to this day. I mean, the New York Times is so dishonest. The Washington Post is so dishonest. They write things. You can do something great, and they can make it sound horrible. You can do something good, and they can make it sound beyond belief bad, like it's the worst thing ever. And I said it a little bit before, you can do something great and it doesn't get reported. That's in a way just as bad, because a lot of people can figure it out. The level of dishonesty in the media is, I think they're the most dishonest people I've ever dealt with.
Well, there may be a lot of truth to that, but he has an ability to get his message out. And the Wall Street Journal opined today that right now he's not doing a very good job, as the recent polling would suggest. Wall Street Journal writing, lately he has all but given up on even talking about the pandemic when he might offer realism and hope about the road ahead, even as the country reopens. His default now is defensive self-congratulations. They also suggest that the one area where voters now give him an edge over Biden is the economy, and he has yet to sort of articulate a clear and consistent vision of where he plans to try to take the economy with the specific policy agenda, both between now and November and in a second term. Fair criticism. Not been the best few weeks on the messaging front for President Trump. We'll put that to our friend John Nolte, editor-at-large at Breitbart, Breitbart.com. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Happy Friday.
Yeah, what about the Journal's view on Trump's messaging and where he finds himself politically?
I've been frustrated with Trump for about 2 months now.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a piece a couple months ago expressing my frustration that rather than use his daily coronavirus briefings as an opportunity to communicate with the public, as an opportunity to correct the record, he allowed the media to destroy those briefings by engaging in 2-hour grudge matches with them, just fighting with them for 2 hours. And I'm totally cool with Trump being Trump as long as unemployment is 4%, as long as statues aren't being toppled and cities aren't going up in flames and 120,000 Americans aren't dying. So he's arguing that he needs to continue these fights with the media, and that's fine in good times. But right now, people are very worried about what's happening in the country on 3 fronts: the riots, the virus, and the economy. And he's screaming law and order on Twitter, and he's getting angry at Fox because someone on Fox said something about him that wasn't true. And he's not the president of the Media Research Center. He's the president of the United States. And I remember 2000. Go ahead.
No, why is he so thin-skinned? He lets everything get to him. He takes it so personally.
And that's all of those traits now are coming out at the worst possible time. He doesn't look like a fighter anymore. He looks thin-skinned. In 2004, I watched George W. Bush win re-election. He won over 50% of the vote, even though he didn't do that the first time in 2000. He did that even though the economy was struggling. He did that even though Iraq was completely falling apart. And the way that he won re-election was that he rose above all the squabbling. The media was out to, anyone who remembers 2004 knows the media was out to kill George W. Bush in 2004. Mm-hmm. They were out to murder that guy just like they are Trump. But Bush stayed on message. And during a crisis, all we want from the president is that he rises above, he communicates with us, he stays above the fray, and he doesn't lose his composure. And now that we have these 3 crises going on, Trump isn't doing that. And that's why he's in trouble. And I know that Trump supporters want to hide behind the solace that the polls were so wrong in 2016, but the national polls were not wrong in 2016. The national polls nailed it. They were less than 1 point off in 2016. And I'm talking about the average of national polls. And if you look at the average of national polls right now, he's down 10 points to an imbecile hiding in his basement.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who thinks Trump isn't in trouble right now is fooling themselves.
Peggy Noonan, now she's no Trump fan, but it doesn't make everything she says incorrect. She writing, frankly, sort of coming from a similar pocket that you're coming from, but there's some differences. She adds about his base. He doesn't understand his own base. I've never seen that in national politics. The real picture at the Tulsa rally was not the empty seats so much as the empty faces, the bored looks, the yawning and phone checking, as if everyone was reenacting something, hearing some old song and trying to remember how it felt a few years ago when you heard it the first time. She essentially saying, yeah, half his base is with him and will defend him and stick with him come hell or high water. But the other half of his base will still vote for him because they know better than to vote for Joe Biden and understand the policies that would be implicated in things like Supreme Court nominees and so forth, as with last time. But they're very frustrated with him, as you're suggesting you have been, for some of the same reasons, and that was in part on display in Tulsa.
Yeah, I actually didn't watch the Tulsa thing. I try to take the weekends off and just forget about this stuff.
Good idea.
But
It's honest.
what I saw from Tulsa was the worst thing that a president can do, or a worst thing that a presidential candidate can do, and that's to not be competent. There was incompetence on display in Tulsa. The incompetence of we have 1 million people who want to come. The incompetence of spending $500,000 so that everyone can address the overflow crowd that never showed up. And the incompetence of not handling the tickets well. And these are the things that are you can't be incompetent. You can't win a presidential election if you're incompetent.
Well, he
Trump,
got punked.
another
I mean,
problem.
he did. He got punked. All those kids on TikTok, they purchased tickets, hundreds of them,
Yep.
and they had no intention of going. How did that was a colossal mistake.
Yeah, and that you just look like you can't handle anything. And he's not been able to wrap his arms around the riots. He's not been able to wrap his arms around the coronavirus because he lost that. I mean, his approval rating was blowing up. He was doing great. And then he allowed the media to destroy those briefings because he just wouldn't stop arguing with them, and then it all fell apart.
This is, and I hate to stop you there, but this is such an important point because the Journal, even though they're critical, also said this about the coronavirus. His record fighting the coronavirus is better than his critics claim after a bad start in late February and March, and that was, I would argue, mainly due to CDC. But he mobilized federal resources to help hard-hit states, especially in New York. So he actually did, on the merits, a pretty decent job, all things considered, in the moment. But it was the messaging that devolved into that went on a tangent to his detriment. And so this is sort of a recurring theme that needs to be addressed in some material way if we're being honest about where he finds himself.
Yeah, and that's and he doesn't understand that people don't expect him to be perfect on the execution. Just like when Iraq was falling apart on Bush, what they expect him is to be cool, to be centered, to be above it all, to show that he is in control of himself. And that's what he's not doing. Another problem he has is that he's up against Joe Biden. Joe Biden is not Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden is not someone that people just have a natural dislike of. And Joe Biden is well known. Everything about Joe Biden, as the pundits say, is baked into the cake. So Biden is sitting in his basement, wisely, hiding out. People kind of like Joe Biden, and he's remaining pure as the acceptable alternative. And that's all he has to do to beat Trump is be the acceptable alternative, because right now Trump's negatives are 55%.
And because
so he's got time to turn it around, but I just don't know if he can.
And then the supposition. I mean, this perhaps is a little bit of conjecture, but boy, if it stays this way and he doesn't begin to turn it around and he doesn't frame the race as particular choices rather than a referendum on him, then you'll see Biden and Democrats try to wiggle out of those debates and use COVID-19 as the cover, won't you?
I actually think it's the opposite. I think just like the Trump campaign overdid the expectations for the Tulsa rally, I think that they're overdoing the expectations for the debate. I mean, right now, the expectations for Joe Biden in the debate are so low that if he doesn't drool and pass out, he could walk out of there a winner.
Yeah.
So I think,
John, don't you think
let's not forget. Go ahead.
Well, sorry, don't you think the debates are the only thing that could save Trump at this point in time, especially in swing states?
Well, I think if he can start framing, like you all just said, if he can start framing the message and get some discipline and start doing some contrast between himself and Biden, that can help. But it's like the Trump campaign is setting Biden up to win. I mean, Biden did make it through a dozen debates during the primary.
Yeah, but you can't hide on it. You can't hide on a stage with one other person rather than seven. I mean, it's a different dynamic.
It is a different dynamic, but he did make it through those debates. So this idea that he's just going to fall apart and get destroyed, or that people haven't already considered the fact that he's not very bright, and that he's a little old.
Yeah.
And he's still polling at 48, 49%. I think they're setting themselves up for another expectation issue.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you about overstating the expectations, and it's just unhelpful. You should be trying to downplay, even if you think that, you should be trying to downplay it for that very reason, so you get maximum benefit. I don't know.
You should be saying this guy's been in politics for 60 years. He's done 30 debates. He's done two vice presidential debates. You know, we're up against a pretty dynamic guy here. He's very glib. You know, he knows his stuff. But no, that's not what they're doing. They're saying that he's a drooling idiot, and that is a big mistake.
I mean, right, because the gaffes that are reported on it, so people can come to that determination for themselves. It's not that complicated. Gaffe after gaffe after gaffe, part of his history of the last 20 or 30 or 40 years too.
Right.
It is, and so you're closer to this than we are. The Trump campaign, Pascal may be a sharp guy when it comes to manipulating social media. But what about that team there and the comms strategists and who has his ear and what exactly is the dynamic, particularly after Tulsa? And I don't really care if Ivanka and Jared are upset or not. That's like soap opera baby stuff. but I'm talking about the actual nuts and bolts of the campaign. Who is sort of really driving the campaign train?
I think it's Trump. I don't think anybody can control the guy. I can't imagine one sane individual who thinks that Trump complaining about a Fox News segment yesterday afternoon. I mean, why is he watching Fox News at 11 in the morning?
Right.
What is going on? He lied. I could see him TiVoing it. I could see him watching it later in the day. But what is he doing watching Fox News at 11 in the morning? In the middle of riots and statue toppling and coronavirus and 14% unemployment. So I think it's him. I think he's the guy in charge, and nobody can control him. He's the president of the United States, and this all falls on him.
John, you wrote a great article in Brietbart about the left's demand for racism far exceeds the supply, and that, we were apologizing to Bubba Wallace for something that didn't happen, but that this is the 9th time the media and the left have invented a news hoax to frame America as racist.
Yeah, I just went back and used, the Google machine, because I had remembered there'd been other news hoaxes besides this stupid NASCAR thing. And what prompted me to do it is that they sent 15 FBI agents out. I mean, 15 FBI agents are rushed out to Alabama because someone tied a loop at the end of a garage pole. And then they discover, obviously, that it wasn't meant anything racial. It was not a hate crime. And yet Bubba Wallace still goes on Don Lemon that night after there is no hate crime. He screams about how it's still a noose and how he's still damaged. And then Al Sharpton's on MSNBC the next day, and he's saying, well, someone could have seen the noose and then assigned the garage to Bubba Wallace. So he might still be and I'm just thinking to myself, this is how desperate the left is. There's so little racism in America. There's so few opportunities for Bubba Wallace to actually feel the sting of racism. There's so few opportunities for Al Sharpton, America's #1 race hustler, to actually find an act of racism to exploit, that they're willing to make grade A fools of themselves whining about a garage pole and claiming that sometime in 2019 someone tied a noose at the end of a garage pole because Sharpton actually said this in so many words. Someone tied this in 2019, assuming that someday Bubba Wallace would be assigned that garage.
Goodness.
And that just tells you how little racism is in America.
Yeah, but it tells you something else too, that they're not fools. And they won't look like fools when we're writing checks for reparations, and they won't look like fools when Mount Rushmore comes tumbling down.
Well, I think people need to understand that this can only go so far. We've been through this before. We went through this in the 60s. I'm not talking about the civil rights movement. That was a totally righteous movement. But all the other stuff, all the campus stuff, that was all Marxism. And this is all Marxism. And I just want people to understand that this can only go so far before there's blowback. Now, a lot of people are expecting blowback soon, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah,
I think that what we're going to have is a period where things just degrade, especially in the cities, to a point, and then people just say, you know what, enough. I'm going to elect Rudy Giuliani or a Rudy Giuliani. So
Maybe.
I'm preparing people. They need to move out of the cities if they can. It's going to last a while, but eventually people are going to get sick of it because after a while you can only live like that for so long and think you're doing the right thing.
Well, I wouldn't exactly call your vision optimistic, but it's more optimistic than mine because the difference between the 60s, what was happening on campuses then versus now, is 50 years of building infrastructure, 50 years of inculcating identity politics. So I actually think this is going to be significantly worse and longer lasting than was what happened in the 60s after the Civil Rights Movement.
There's a great story in the New York Times about it's mainly white women in a suburb of Minneapolis. And they decided to keep the police out, and they're not going to call the police. And everyone should read the story because things went to hell almost immediately. Carjackings, the homeless have moved onto their lawns. The homeless have taken over their park. It's no longer safe there. And that's why I feel pretty good that things are going to turn around quick because that's how bad things are going to get. They're going to get that bad that quickly. And eventually even these liberal white women, who are the worst people in America,
Absolutely,
they're going to get tired of this, and they're going to get tired of it real quick. So I would urge everyone to read that story because that's how I think this is going to play out.
John Nolte, I just love that statement. John Nolte, editor-at-large at Breitbart, Breitbart.com. John, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You're listening to Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Presenting a good appearance is